really enjoy doing the coloring and learning about the muscles.
Good, good. I'm glad that helps because, yeah, the more time we spend with the material, the easier it is, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's all new terminology, and I think one of the things is good with this terminology is to just slow it down and sort of check in the, like, especially like the facial muscles. The names are so weird, but they're actually meaningful if you look at them, right, a little bit. They mean something. Did you get that too?
So Erasmus, what does that mean though? It's a crazy name, Erasmus.
Wait, which one is that?
I mean, I know it's not on the thing, but it's you know, the on the mandible, the back part of the mandible.
Oh, the ramus. Yeah,
Oh, the ramus.
Ramus
Ramus.
means bar. Ramus means bar.
Oh,
in
bar.
Latin or something like that. Yeah.
Oh.
Or yeah.
Yeah.
Is that's not on the list, right? Or is it?
No, but I know that in the.
Oh no, it is on the list. Yeah, it is. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, it's just an interesting name, and then like the different. All the different...
I know it's cool, huh? I like this kind of stuff, but I mean, first I was really afraid of anatomy when I started learning it because I thought it was so freaking complicated and I could never understand any of that. And once I realized it's really kind of more of, in reality, it's a kinesthetic situation. It's really what's in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, you know, over time it became clearer and clearer. And then I tried to present it in a way that's hopefully somewhat clear to you guys. Good morning.
Good morning.
How is everybody?
Good, thank you.
Good. How's the material? Any comments, questions?
No, it's good. I checked in. I thought it's a holiday today.
Well, it is a holiday today, but I decided I run it anyway since we recorded and a few of you guys have a ability to sign on. There's no, since it's not mandatory anyway, I didn't want to find a different time. And so that's why I'm holding it. And if you can't make it, that's okay. If I got a few, if I don't have to hold a full monologue, I'm happier because then I don't forget all the stuff. But, you know, if not too many on the call, that's fine. That's fine. As long as we have a little bit of a good time. But material so far, you're okay with this week? It's a lot of stuff. You're okay with all these terms?
I had difficulty with the labeling the skull.
In what respect? Figuring out what I'm showing on a picture or just because it's so many terms?
Figuring out exactly where it was on the picture. I had a problem with the petrous portion. I had a problem with the ramus. I
agree with her too.
I rewatched your video several times. I went to OpenStax to look at their diagrams as well. And I was just hoping that you might be able to go over that with us with the actual
yeah, let's do it.
Diagram.
So I think so. No, I'm glad you're bringing that up because some of the stuff, as you even see, right, some of the stuff is even hard to visualize in an OpenStax book. And let me see where we at. Are we am I sharing with you? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So let's just start with it right away. And so we go, let me go to the, hey, how do you guys like the tabs and all my pink?
That's very helpful.
Good, because it took me a long time. I feel like I'm a programmer now to figure out these darn tabs. But I'm glad I finally figured it out. So I'm going to go back and do the other ones too at some point. So anyway, we were talking, wait. No, it was on the skull, right? It wasn't on the facial muscles.
Surprisingly, the facial muscles wasn't as hard for me as the skull.
You know, I agree. For me, it was the same because once you slow down with the names, they kind of make a little bit of sense. At least, well, maybe that's because I've been doing it for so many years. I don't know. All right. I don't mean, oh, look at that. They don't even put it on. Shoosh. This is the ramus right here. The bar-like structure on the side. That's the ramus right here. And then that's the body in the front. You see that?
Yeah.
Shoot, the other thing I should have done, maybe pulled out. Let me pull out my PowerPoints that I use for the videos. That might help a little bit. Sorry, I haven't done that. Wait. No, maybe not. Why can't I do that? Once I'm talking, I can't manipulate the machine. Oh, great. So give me a second here. Didn't that come up?
So just for the future, if we don't see a line, but we want to draw it where we know it is,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
we can just do it ourselves.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I usually mention that because actually the line, don't ignore the lines, because when I look for, because I did all these things myself, looking at pictures and then, you know, downloading from the internet and creating these handouts. And so sometimes, and I couldn't remove the lines all the time. And sometimes the lines are a little bit goofy. So absolutely you can basically ignore the lines and just really go with what I'm asking you for with the terms. Because the other thing is there's so many different terms, right? And we're just kind of touching on some of them to start the process. I try to touch on the most important ones, but you know, sometimes it's not always that easy to choose those. So can you see this picture? Hello?
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it.
Here? That's from the booklets, actually. In the booklets, I have those, and now I don't make them mandatory anymore. But so here's the ramus. There's the ramus. This is also the picture I use in the video, and I think so. And then here is the body. See the mandible body, and then what else you need to know from the mandible? The coronoid process is right here. See that thing here, coronoid process. That thing sticking up on the mid, like behind the bone here. What this is, this becomes a muscle attachment for the temporalis muscle, which goes from here down to that part, and then it helps close the jaw this way from the bottom up. If you look at the face, the chewing muscles, which are the next chapter in the facial muscles. So that's the coronoid process. And then what else we got there? Mandibular condyle, and mandibular condyle is the back part. When you look, and here's the ear, right in front of the ear. If you move forward a little bit and then open and close your jaw, you sort of feel that moving a little bit there, that bone. That's that bone. That's the mandibular condyle. So you see the word condyle, you always think of a joint. A condyle always makes a joint. You see that here too. You see on the underside of the skull, you see these parts that which is actually where the skull is held up on the spine. They're also called condyles. They're occipital condyles because they lie on the occipital bone, which is the brown part of the bone here. And so condyle, the word condyle, always a joint. And then you said petrous portion, right?
Yes.
Right in here. So when you open the skull up, you see the front here. And then here, this is the cribriform plate and the crista galli. That's those little holes. And then you move backwards. Here's that indentation, that's the sella turcica. This is where the pituitary gland sits in, which is a very interesting part of the bone because the brain is very moldable and very static in terms of making a lot of new cells. But it's very flexible. It's plastic, they call that. And in here, what sits in here is the pituitary gland. And it has to be very, very enclosed with bone and hard membranes because the glands are epithelial tissue. And one of the characteristics of epithelial tissue is that they divide a lot and they make a lot of new cells. And the gland, that makes a lot of sense because glands create hormones, they make substances. And the pituitary gland makes a lot of different hormones and then squirts those or squeezes those into the bloodstream, and then the blood picks it up and brings it to the different parts of the body that then have a reaction with that. And so that's why this sella turcica is very, very bony and is sort of a hole inside that bone. It's a little hard to visualize here that there's a depth to it. So that's, I think, on the terminology. I wanted to mention that briefly. And then here, On the temporal bone, on the inside, is the petrous portion. And what's interesting about the petrous portion, why we actually study is because this is where the inner ear is and the balancing apparatus. So inside here, carved out of the bone, is that little snail, if you've seen that before, that cochlea that we can hear. That's all inside there, and we'll talk about that when we get to the neurological part, which is a little bit later down in the program. And then another part is that big hole here, and that's the foramen magnum, and that's where, if you think of the brain sitting up here, and then the spinal cord goes down the back of the spine, or the back where the spine is, the vertebral column. And then from there, the spine feeds out into the body, and the nerves can talk to the body that way. Mm-hmm. All right, that's for that. Is that clarifying a little bit?
Yes.
Let's see what else we got. Any other ones that were a little unclear that we should go over here on the skull? Let's do that first. Anybody? Any other term that wasn't clear? Silence. Well, that's good. That means the rest was pretty good. So let's then move to, what was I trying to do?
Dr. M,
yes, go
would
ahead.
it be possible to make those available at all so that we could reference them?
Those visuals?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the challenge. That's part of the booklet. So it's, let me figure out how to do that. Let me show you what I do have so far. It becomes somewhat, the problem is it becomes a friggin' copyright problem a little bit. That's my question I have, but I'll do whatever I can. But let me show you what I do have so far. If you go down here under the test review, you have, what you do have is pictures. And I'm gonna use those to do a little thing anyway. These pictures here in the test review. If you click on here, you get a new tab and it goes to a document that is just all pictures that I use on the test. So one thing I would do for sure, I know you're talking about seeing where the terms are, that's the first thing, but then once you got that, what I would do is I would find labels on them and say like, see, this is the petrous portion, this is sella turcica, this is the foramen magnum, just label terms that are on that list on that to practice and get better at it. And then the other thing you can always do is, do you guys do Google to find some of these terms that are hard?
Yes.
Is that successful?
Yes.
Okay. So let's also do that. That you guys try a little Googly, I try a little too, and then maybe we can share. If you find some good ones, maybe we can share some of them. If you find a good one, just shoot me a text or shoot me an email and put it in or so if you feel like that would be great. And then we can help each other out a little bit. And I'll see what I can do also on my end to find a bit more pictures with a few more terms on them. All right, let's then, if that's good, any other questions on that?
Dr. M, will we be going over our test 1 at all so that we know what we got wrong?
Yeah, what I would like to do with that, I know I saw some of the indication on the Padlet. I would like to do a sort of a study group on that. So if you want to go over the test, I would like to have you reach out to me because I do not want a video on that. Number one, I gotta, because I have some students who have delays for some certain, medical reasons and so forth. So I don't want to discuss the test openly yet. But if you do want to be going over it, I'm very happy to do that. But let's do it individually, or we make a little group and then we'll find a time and we'll meet on Zoom. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good. So please reach out and share that, and then we can do it later this week. Whenever you guys feel like, I'm happy, even do it individually, that's totally fine. Okay? All right. So that's that then. So then let's see if you guys have a hard time. How is you guys with the facial muscles? Did you feel pretty okay about that?
Those were not as bad.
They were not as bad, right? Well, they were, yeah, I know, there weren't as many, huh? So then I know that's the thing. So that's good. That one thing is, many of you do really good with this. Some of you guys don't do the coloring, but basically, and then some of you guys had questions how many colors to use and things like that. What I would like to make sure is you understand is that I want you to tap into the creative process, because not everybody learns all the same. So use as many colors as you want. Make flashcards. Some people just draw it. I mean, that's fantastic, even though you think you can't draw. It doesn't matter to me how it looks. It's the process of doing it and spending some time with these terms and sort of massaging the brain cells to remember those terms a little bit. So that's, I wanted to say that. So everything else was good so far on this end. I'm still working through, no, I think I graded all the cell discussions. It was my birthday week last week, so I've been a little lazy with the grading, so sorry about that. But I'm catching up today, and I should be all finished up later on this afternoon with the previous weeks as well. So that's pretty good. So what I want to do is then let's just do a little bit of a quizzy type thing. Let's start with that a little bit so you guys get a little understanding of that process. So what I would like you to do in your own four walls, take a sheet of paper and a pen, and take the term list, or take, if you can access the terms that we have done this week, take your homework out or your booklet if you have it. And I'm going to ask you a few terms, like 10 or so, and I want you to write them down. And then when we finished about them, then we go through them. And then I want you to, shout out as many as you can and have a little fun with that. So we have a little interaction. All right. So if you have a sheet of paper or something to write, I want you to first give me and tell me, and if you can't do it yet, that's totally fine, because it's a process. By the time we get to the test, you will have enough practice that you'll be good with this. So the first term I want you to tell me is what's between the eyebrows. What's that called? And do not say it, just write it down as number one. What's that called? Number one. So there's a term. And when I go through these terms on the test, I have bones that I ask you, they're whole bones. And then I have landmarks, and those are parts on a bone. So this landmark that I want you to tell me here on number one is on this bigger bone. And the bone would be the frontal bone. But I want you a term underneath that frontal bone. That's this one here, this landmark. So that was number one. You good with that?
Yes.
I got it. I got it.
Good. All right, good. Then number two. Yeah, see, I made these pictures really fast when COVID started, so they're not all complete. But, we do what we can. So number two, I want you to tell me the bone that covers the back of the skull. What is that bone called? It's the whole bone, not just landmarks, the whole bone. What is that bone called? The back of the skull. That's number two. And then number three, I want you to tell me, what is this big hole called here in the middle? We just talked about it. The big hole in the middle of the skull. Write that down for me. Look it up on a list. You can use the list on the test. And all the notes. So make sure you get used to using all of that. Number four, so 5 was that big hole. Number 4, I want you to tell me, is this bone down here, this big bar-like bone that we chew with, that like lowers the lower jaw. What's the lower jawbone called? That's number 4. Number 5, looking for more terms here. Number 5, go a little more detail here. The roof of the mouth. So this back here, this is the roof of the mouth, as a term called that is a portion of the maxilla. This is the maxilla bone where the upper teeth sit in, and inside here the mouth, the roof of the mouth is a landmark on that maxillary bone. Can you tell me what that's called? I have to remember it too. See, that's why I teach anatomy, so I remember all these terms after a while. It's been very helpful. Number 6. Let's go and do a few facial muscles. So they're in here. Yes. The first facial muscle I would like you to tell me is the one that encircles the eye. A facial muscle that encircles the eye. And number 7 is a muscle that actually is over that ramus that we just talked about on the mandible. It's a bar-like muscle, go up and down. It helps with chewing. What is that muscle called? Number 7, one of the chewing muscles, the one on the outside of the jawbone. Number 7. Number 8 is a muscle that goes, and now these are interesting. These are actually named by what they do. It is a muscle that's attached to the corner of the lip, the angle of the mouth, and it goes down and it depresses the angle of the mouth. What is that muscle called? Listen to my word. It depresses the angle of the mouth. That's number 7. And then number 8, we go to the opposite and we look at a muscle that's attached on the top of the corner here, or on the corner of the mouth again, on the angle, and it goes upwards to the cheekbone. And its name is actually according to what that cheekbone is. So it's the smiling muscle. This one is not named by its action. This one is named by the bone it attaches to. That's number 8. And let's leave it at that. That's good enough. All right.
That was number 9.
Oh, that was number, oh, shoot, I missed one. Oh, yeah, that was. Okay, good. Well, then let's leave it at that. All right. Thank you. I know I used to, when I do it in class, I've been missing it from doing it in class. And so I used to never write anything down. So you have to tell me what they all are. All right. So, but let's do that. So when we solve this, I want you to just unmute yourself and say it loud. I want you to get into this understanding. And so just all shout it out. What is number 1?
Glabella.
Bella.
The glabella, very good. Believe me, the glabella rhymes with my second daughter's name, Isabella, so it's always on the test. So make sure you start that. And it's also a litmus test who's paying attention, because I always have someone I get it wrong. Number 2, what's number 2?
Occipital.
The external occipital protuberance, I believe.
The bone, you're good. The bone is the occipital bone, which is what I ask. If I ask for a landmark and I point here, then that is the external occipital protuberance. Very, very good. So that's a great place where you see when I ask for the bone versus the landmark. On the test, if you mess up 1 or 2, I'm not going to be giving you too much grief. Well, if you give me the bone, not the landmark, I'll give you a little more grief than if you give me the landmark, not the bone. Because sometimes, the landmark's a little bit more to remember. Anyway, number 3, what's number 3?
Foramen Magnum.
Foramen Magnum.
Foramen Magnum, that hole where the spinal cord. Actually, what's interesting is a little bit of the brain stem goes through here. So the brain stem actually goes slightly into the spinal column, which is kind of interesting. That's why when Christopher Reeve broke C2, the Superman guy, he couldn't breathe anymore because the breathing centers are already down there. So that's why that happened. Anyway, next bone, number 4. What's this bone?
Mandible.
Mandible, very good. And then on the maxilla, what's the roof of the mouth?
The palatine
Process.
Very good. The front part here. So there's actually, if you can maybe slightly make it out, not good. There's a slight line here. The back of the line is a bone by itself called the palatine bone. And the front of the line in here is part of the maxilla, the roof of the mouth, and they call that the palatine process. So that's a difference between the process of the bone. Keep that in mind, because I can ask you on that. If I ask you bone, and I don't have to be a full hard ass about it, but if I ask you bone, then that would be the palatine bone. And the label will be in the back, obviously. Okay, so number 6. Let's go to the facial. What's number 6?
Orbicularis.
Orbicularis oculi.
Oculi, very good. Orbicularis oculi is around the eye. Orbicularis oris is around the mouth. And I remember oris as in oral fixations, which is what, it's even though they're goofy, whatever you can attach a name to in your own brain and memory and make a mnemonic or so, make it. That's the way to go. Number 7 is a bar-like muscle on the side.
Mandibular ramus.
The muscle.
The masseter.
The masseter. Good. That's good. The mandibular ramus is the bone underneath it, and the masseter is the muscle that lays on top. When you look at the video, there's actually, it's interesting. It's like a sandwich. The ramus is a sandwich. There's a muscle on the outside, and there is a muscle on the inside of the mouth, also between the teeth and the ramus of the mandible. And that's called the pterygoids. That's a pterygoid. So it's kind of like you see the outside moving when you chew, but you also have one on the inside that pulls the mandible up when you chew, make it very flexible that way. That becomes interesting clinically when you deal with temporomandibular joint disorders and you want to massage that muscle also. That's where I get interested in that. Anyway, number 8. Nobody?
Depressor anguli.
Yeah.
Yeah, the depressor anguli oris.
Very good. Depressor anguli oris. Remember, look at the name. Depressing means I'm depressed. You go down, you feel down. Anguli is if you look at this, is an angle of the mouth. I mean, you got to understand these people when they made these names, they had way too much wine. They were in the dark, candlelit room with cadavers, and they had to figure out what to name these damn things. And so you got to, it's sort of a little bit of a creative process that way. So that's that, and oris obviously refers to to the mouth, and so that's why that's called the depressor anguli oris. You have one here too that goes this way. It's actually wide, and it goes down, and that's the depressor labii inferioris because it's below, inferior to the lip, and labii means lip. So that's the other one. Sometimes people get a little confused with it. And then last but not least, number 9.
Zygomaticus.
Zygomaticus, very, very good. That's the smiling muscle. So that muscle is not named by what it does, or it's named by the bone it attaches to the cheekbone, and that's called the zygomatic bone.
So, yeah, it's hard to, I can't even pronounce it, but I had it right though.
Good. Well, that's partly why we're doing that, right? So we get used to pronouncing. And the fun part is you can actually really pronounce it the way you want to because it's Latin. And so, when you go to Germany, and I go to Germany and they use these terms, I sometimes have to think, is that really the same term? Because it sounds way different when they say it. And so, you can always feed back to that. So it's not like, oh, we're saying it wrong kind of thing. If I say it, then it's probably the way we say it most in America. So don't feel bad if you sort of putz it in terms of the pronunciation, is because you don't really do that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, we want to have as much. The problem with schools, I see it often, is it needs to be joyous, because when we're in a little bit of a relaxed environment, we can actually learn. The problem is some people then get just lazy, and that's not going to fly, because then we don't learn nothing. So we find a little bit of that middle ground, but I think we're trying to do it pretty well. I hope. Anyway, so any questions to this? These terms again and this little exercise?
Can you please explain one more time the difference between the two depressors?
Oh, yeah. Where was I? Here.
Like, are you specifically going to say corner, and that's how, like on a test, or because they're both right next to each other?
Yeah, so what I look at is when I look at the corner. So when I see angle, it's the corner. and then lay-by is flip. So the lay-by one is broader. It's sort of the whole bottom going this way, and the corner one is this way. So they're both depressor because they pull the corner of the mouth or the lips down, but then the anguli is referring to angle, and this is sort of looking like an angle, the corner of the mouth. So that's why I'm labeling it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help a little bit?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, and I still owe you some stuff, Katrina. I'm working on that. I'm sorry, I'm a little behind everything. And that, okay, is that it, or anybody else have a question with those terms that comes up right now? You can always ask me later again. Don't worry about that. We go over these a few times. So when things come up, just write them down or shoot me a text. I can try to get back to you quickly on that. Good. All right. So if nobody has any question, if something comes up, just say it and we'll go back to it. Let's look at, so that was week 4 last week. All right. And now let's look at week 5. And we're just basically continuing now with terminology. So we're going to go to the axial skeleton first and the joints. First, actually, the joints. So there's some video on that. So there's actually two lessons. It's the joints and then it's the axial skeleton. So we're sort of front loading it a little bit. We're this week and next week from the info is still fairly heavy. And then the last 2 weeks after that, we go into the muscles of the upper and lower extremities, and then we're not having that much information all at once. So we can massage these terms as much as possible, and then get ready for that exam, which usually people do really well. And by the way, you did great on the test. I have nobody, I think, is almost like, did I make it too easy? Did I make it too easy? Was the test too easy, or did you feel like it was a reflection of what you...
It was very difficult.
No. Yeah, it's not so easy.
I think you should look at how many minutes it took us to find out if it was too easy, because
actually, usually I do that. That's correct. That is correct, because I can see that. No, I mean, I hope it, I hope at the end of the day, you learned something from it, and you all did fantastic. So whatever happened, you did great. So this week, we talk a little bit about articulations, which are, the word is joints. I should just put this in the parentheses. Articulation is the Latin term for joints. So when you see a word like arthritis or so, ARTH, you always know it refers to joints. We talk about the types of joints briefly, watch through that, learn. You don't have to memorize those terms, but I want you to understand, like syn means together, chondrosis means cartilage. So this is a little bit more about learning the terminology or getting familiar with these terms. I am not having test questions on these terms. There are too many of them. I don't like that part about this chapter. So be mindful of that. But I think it's interesting, like the skull, the sutures is actually a joint. It just doesn't move much, but we do have therapies like craniosacral therapies that moves the skull plates, and I can move. I feel skull plates move in patients, and so that's very interesting. Even though they say they're not movable, more modern we know they're movable. The tooth is a joint. Those are joints. They're very strong joints, hopefully. And then, like, for example, between the forearm bones, we also have like this thick membrane that connects them. And that's also creates a joint at some point because it's a connection between bones. This is actually very interesting because this often gets injured because people who type a lot or do a lot, they get a little, using it all the time, it wears out a little bit and people start having some pain syndromes with that. So that's clinically somewhat interesting. There's also that kind of joint between the two leg bones on the bottom, between the knee and the ankle. There's also two. There's an outside bone, the fibula, and the inside bone, the tibia. And there it's very prominent in basketball players, for example. They jump all the time and that wears these membranes out. Anyway, so that's that. Then there's a joint here between the vertebra that we learn a little bit about it. So listen through these, get an understanding, learn what you can, that don't worry about memorizing these terms. Focus on understanding these terms. What it's more important to me that you're spending time understanding is the joint mechanics. Like when we know what the movement is, like flexion. What is flexion? Flexion is when we decrease a joint angle. So when we bend an elbow, for example, that's flexion. And extension is the opposite. So we have 3 axes, and the motions go around those 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. And we have a term that, like, flexion decreases the angle of the joint, extension then increases it. So it's an opposite motion. We have this one is a little bit weird. We have abduction and adduction. We have a movement of a limb. These are limb motions. We have a midline in the middle of the body, and then we have a movement that, for example, bringing the arm out away from the midline is known as abduction. I know whoever came up with these terms really tried to torture us. And then when you bring the limb back to the midline, it's called adduction. So only a B or a D difference. The way I remember that is ADD is adding something. So I'm adding, so to speak, the extremity, the arm, the hand here back to the midline of the body. That's the only way I remember that term, for example. So, you know, make mnemonics, make understandings of how you need to do it, even though it seems funny and goofy. And then another one is internal or medial or inner rotation. That's when you turn the arm inward or when you turn the arm back outward. So when you bring the when you turn something inward, like the leg, for example, you bring the foot medial inward, that's internal rotation. You bring the foot outward, that's external rotation. And then later on, when we talk about the muscles, we can then talk about what motion does the muscle do, and that's why that's important that we know that terminology. Because, for example, muscles that do lateral or external rotation, they're actually up in the back of the butt. They're in the posterior element where the gluteus muscles are. And so then we can talk about that. And then we got some specialized motions. We got pronation, supination, that's palm up or palm down. It's very specific, only in the palm. But we have a muscle, for example, called the pronator teres. And so that's then a muscle that brings the palm down. Or we have muscles that are called the supinator muscles, and those are muscles that bring the palm up. So that becomes somewhat interesting and important there. The way I remember that is pronation is palm down. I don't know how to remember that. But what I do remember is supination sounds like a soup, and I want to hold a bowl of soup in my palm up and not palm down. And so that was a goofy one. I didn't come up with that. That was my teacher in Cairo school who brought that one up. But that was a pretty funny one. Hold a bowl of your soup with the palm up. You can't hold it when you're pronated. That'll turn the soup down and put it down the sink. Dorsiflexion and plantar flexion specifically done on the ankle. Dorsiflexion is really actually the flexion because it closes the angle here. But we do use plantar flexion in the ankle for some reason. I don't know. But the way I remember it is I plant my foot into the ground is plantar flexion, like the plants live in the ground. So that's, for example, that was pretty easy to remember. Eversion and inversion is a little bit more difficult, but it's important. It's also in the ankle. But you know who twists their ankle? Everybody twists their ankle before. Hello, I'm sure you have, right? Most people. Yeah, right. So that will be inversion sprain. So you bring the palm inward, the foot inward is inversion. You bring the sole of the foot outward is eversion. So when we talk about a sprain, most sprains are inversion sprains because the ligaments on the outside of the ankle are much weaker than the ligaments on the inside. And so we tend to collapse towards the outside. And most of us know about that. Then we have on the head, we have a protraction and retraction. That's on the mandible, but we can also use it on the head. So that's bringing the whole, it's not like closing the angle, like bringing the head up, but bringing the head back, like the whole head goes back, like making a double chin kind of thing. That's actually a really good exercise. We'll have we go through that when we do office ergonomic evaluation. We have an integration exercise on that. Elevation depression, that's pretty self-explanatory. And then the last one that's important here is opposition. And that's bringing the fingers together. So those are the things I do want you to focus on here a little bit. And then after that, we go into the and again, if you have questions, just talk into me. I look at the clock and I don't want to keep it too long. I want to close it out and give you your day, but just ask if you have questions. Then we talk about the axial skeleton, and that's the spinal column and then the rib cage, basically. And of course, what we're going to do is we talk a little bit about the different vertebrae, and then also about the unique. So we talk about a generic vertebra, but then we also talk about unique features of the vertebra in the different parts of the spinal column. And you see a lot of this is pictures. And then the text, the bullet points should reflect the videos for the most part. Sometimes it's slightly off because the videos are, it takes a long time to make these things. So it takes me years to do these things, but it should correspond pretty well. And then the second to the last thought here goes to the sacrum and the coccyx. Those are the tailbones and the ones between the pelvics and the bottom. Those have very different features, but they come basically from the spinal column. If you see these little these separations here. So these were actually vertebrae at some point in our evolutionary development. And then lastly, on this chapter, we have the rib cage. And we have ribs. The ribs have all the different same features basically, but here we talk about true ribs, false ribs. Depends on how they attach to the chest, the breastbone, the sternum, which is right here. We have a few different parts of that. So we'll talk briefly a little bit about that, and you'll learn a little more about that. And then after that, we go and finish this week up in the lesson department with the arms and leg bones. And again, right now, if you're not overwhelmed, you're not in the right place. So don't freak out about it. Just go through it, understand it as much as you can as you listen to the videos. Look at the pictures, Google some pictures. Reach out to me. If you can't visualize a term, text me and say, hey, I can't see that. I'll go look up a picture and ship you a picture that I can visualize it. That is not a problem. That's why we have these texting abilities. If you don't use Pronto because somehow it's not working for you, which is a new product we use at Merit, it's been a little spotty, I think, just text me. I have no problem with that. But we'll go through the upper bones. We go through the shoulder blade, the scapula, and the collarbone. And then from there, we go down. Look, and we talk about the different parts a little bit. For the most part, these are muscle attachments that we want to look at the landmarks. The clavicle, we don't talk too much about the clavicle. It's an interesting bone. It's very flat. If you fall down with an outstretched arm, a lot of people, especially kids, actually break that bone. It's the most frequently broken bone. It's a flat bone. It's not really a strong bone. But what's really cool and interesting about this clavicle is if we don't have a clavicle, the shoulder blade would just come forward. And you can bring the two shoulders completely together in the front. The clavicle is what keeps that shoulder back and holds it back. And that's really actually, it's a small little twig that holds that whole thing back. And so that's why it's vulnerable to breakage, but it has a very important job. The other thing that's interesting about the clavicle is the only joint that the whole arm and shoulder attaches as a joint to the axial skeleton, to the chest and the spinal cord, to the trunk, is in this joint. Everything else is muscle attachments, which is really great because it makes the shoulder extremely flexible. The arms are very, very flexible, but it comes with a price, and we wear out, and we have more injuries on a shoulder than we have on a pelvis, for example. So then we do the upper arm bone. We have some features on that I want you to go through. We do the lower arm bone. We have some features on that. When we go through the wrist also, we don't go, look, I don't have too much on the wrist. I'm not going to make you study all these bones, even though that's interesting, but it becomes just really difficult, I think, it's too many terms. But we want to know that we have the wrist here, and then we have the web of the hand. Those are metacarpal, so that I'll make you know. And then the fingers are really all the same names on the bones. They're called phalanges. We just have different ones. We have proximal, middle, and distal ones. So even though that looks extremely complex here, we're trying not to overdo that. I want you to get the general. Pelvis, hip bone, the lower extremities. We'll talk about that, do some terms on that. And then we have leg bone. These are fairly similar to the arms, very representative. Like the arm have bumps too up here, smaller bumps, bigger bumps. They're fairly congruent. So it's almost like some of the stuff you learn the one time and then you can sort of transpose over. Same with the forearm versus the leg. And then what's interesting is that in the arm, the upper part is called the arm, the forearm, the lower part is called the forearm. In a leg, the upper part is called the thigh and the lower part is called the leg. So that's where that comes in, thigh and leg. As for us, that's the sort of the proper terminology for that. So then we do leg and then we finish up with the ankles, and the ankles is similar to the hand, looks very similar. We have like these these tarsals, and then we have the web or the metatarsals. Meta means between. So they're between these and then the phalanges, which are the pieces on the front, the toes, basically. Good. So that's that. And then from there, we have some integration activities, of course. Questions to massage the material. Do you guys like those questions? Are those helpful?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, they're pretty helpful.
Good. I'm glad, because it took me about 3 years to make for the whole course.
It's also helpful to read other people's answers too afterwards.
Yeah, that's good too. Right? Yeah, absolutely. No, it's I'm glad they're useful. It was one of those things where I try to figure out how to integrate the information better. But we have more labeling exercises, so do those. On those again, we have the term lists. That's if you go to the labeling exercises. Yeah, I do encourage you to watch the video. It's not long, and I'm even young there. And you see these terms. Do not worry about indicating any other terms on the term list. I mean, on the labeling exercise and the coloring exercises, because it's plenty already. And I'm kind of looking for that because I want to make sure that you know that and not think you have to do everything. So prioritize these terms. And then some of them, like here, I do have a couple of questions that I want you to also answer. As well, individually to indicating just labeling and coloring. You can, of course, use your own way of doing it. You can use the tool that's here. You've been doing it great so far. Be creative. Do it your own way. We finished the habit, the health kit. We finished that. That was wonderful. How was that for you? Was that helpful to do? No, silence. It was all right, right? It was all right to do it a little bit. So here you finish up the little scorecard, do the assessment again, take a couple minutes, don't worry too much, and take a picture from the front and back and just upload it. That's what this one is about. Then I briefly want you to, we do have discussions on these things. That way we have integrations a little bit. And so spend, give it a few minutes, reflect on it. Don't spend too much time on it, but reflect a little bit on, I want you to reflect how easy, these are the questions, how easy, difficult, annoying that was. Be honest, I'm not grading you on that. Believe me, before I started people meditate, it took me years to think that they're going to think I'm way goofy and crazy to do that. And so I'm actually grateful that not everybody's just rejected. But then I want to reflect briefly on the benefits. Did you have any benefits? A lot of times drinking water, people get like, oh, my skin clears up or so. That kind of stuff. And then, briefly think, are you continuing? And what's your motivation? If so, what's your motivation? So just don't spend too much time on that. We have plenty of terms, but I want you to finish up the exercise that way. And then, respond to a couple and then feedback to them is thank you for responding to me. That way we know we're all sort of paying attention to it. And I go over and over on these and then I, give you the points. Yeah, if you then get full point value, for example, if somebody did not color the labeling exercise and coloring, I give you the points that you get, like the 5. And then when you finish that, just upload it again and then you get the full point value. And if I'm too slow or so, just reach out or if you have questions. As an integrating exercise, we finish this week with the ergonomic evaluation. And so I want you to listen to, well, you don't have to listen to this actually. We can just print this out because I made a little pamphlet. I did this, I include this because I think it's been helpful for the staff at Merit. I did it for them originally. And it just talks a little bit about things and gives some tips. And so what I want you to do with this exercise is just briefly look at your workstation. since we're all doing this stuff at home. And then I want you to analyze your workstation a little bit and see, here are some questions. Analyze your workstation, monitor the eye reactions. You look at a couple of things and then answer a couple of these questions and send me that in if you could. And that way you learn at least a little bit about what it all means that we learn all these terms. Why do we learn all these terms? So they're not just blanket terms. Good. All right. Any questions? You guys are very patient with me today.
For this last week's health kit, what did you expect us to turn in for that? Because I think I misunderstood and I turned in the actual rating that I did before and after.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, and I know, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to communicate it sometimes too, so don't feel bad if it's not too clear for you guys. I'm getting better at it as I go along. What the goal was to do the evaluation one time at first as an initial, like these 7 areas of the assessment, and then do an integration of one of the 3 things for 3 weeks, like meditate a little, drink water, or monitor what you drink water, or do exercise. And then you check off on the little score sheet, or make a little sheet yourself where you check that off. Or some of you also did give me feedback on the texting, if it worked. And then for the ones that worked, and then you reassess yourself, like today, or now that we finished the integration, and then you upload those stats, just that card. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll just have to re-upload it because I already did.
Just re-upload it. Yeah, that's okay. Some of these exercises I try to do as well as I can, but I'm not going to be a complete stickler, because again, if some of it is confusing, I don't want to penalize you guys for that. Okay.
So are we? So we are doing the. Are we checking in this week as well on the health kit, or last week was the last week?
Last week was the last week. We're done with doing that.
Okay.
You're relieved from that. Now you have to do it on your own if it was helpful. So now you just finish up. Now go ahead. Sorry, William.
No. I just was agreeing with you, laughing with you. That's it.
So you just finish up uploading that thing, have a brief reflection, share the reflection with your co-students, and then we're done with that part.
Will do.
Super. All right. Anything else right now? Good. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Keep doing the good work. Take some time to breathe and enjoy the weather if you can. And reach out to me if you need anything. Cool.
Cool. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Take
Pleasure
care.
having you. It's enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you. Bye.